I'm putting down here a risk likelihood and impact graph, okay? And in our audit, we've identified a low-level risk. Oh, we identified another risk in our audit planning and our risk assessment, and we think it's more consequential. We identify some more lower-level risks, some more medium-level risks. You know what? Right now we've identified, 7 different risks. You know what? I think this is going to make a good audit report. I think we can stop, trying to understand different risks, and we're good now. But what happens if your due diligence, your due professional care was insufficient, and that lurking behind all of that, there was a much more significant risk that you did not notice? Let me just tell you that not identifying a significant risk in an audit can be one of the most significant failures that you could get, and can be, quite honestly, embarrassing. Imagine you're performing an internal audit in any area, but let's say it's a very high-level, important audit. You are finished with your audit, you consider that you've touched on everything important, you bring it up to senior management. They go through the findings and they ask you, yes, but what about? What about that giant consideration, that single audit problem that might have been bigger than every single other one? That indeed would be a very embarrassing situation. So in my audits, in the teams that I've had, I have always placed a very large importance on assessing risk, on having a formalized, properly conducted risk assessment, which I document in many different ways. I would ask for workflows, that have often different diagram charts to show exactly where the risks are in the process reviewed. I would ask for potentially a risk inventory. In fact, I would usually put that as the absolute minimum for an internal audit, is that there should be a risk inventory broken down by, by area, and in each area you'd have the different risks that they would consider in each area. And I would put that as a step that I, as head of internal audit, would need to review for every single audit before the tests are planned, before the rest is planned, before the audit program is created. I would want to see that risk assessment. I would also really wish to have a discussion, often with high-level people in the organization, to make sure that any significant risk that is known would be brought to my attention before the end of the audit, and quite preferably right at the beginning of an audit. So let me say, it's embarrassing not to identify a big risk, but is it a breach of the code of ethics? I'm going to let you think about that for a second. Is it a breach of the code of ethics? You should have a thorough identification of risks performed in every single internal audit. This is effort that you make, due professional care, to identify risks in every single internal audit. However, if you discover a risk, a significant risk, a so-called material risk, and you decide to completely ignore it, then that would be a breach of due professional care and of the code of ethics. The audit work should cover all significant risks, and here's the important, which have been identified. Now, let's go back to the question I asked a bit before. So is it a breach of the code of ethics to not identify a significant risk? No. However, it would be a breach of your code of ethics to not have done the work, the due professional care to actually, consider identifying the different risks in the audit. To definitely, and this is a very big one, to ignore significant risks that you actually identified, and to not cover in your audit all significant risks that you've seen. But the standards, however, note that when performed correctly, when all of these things are performed correctly, you would not be in breach of the code of ethics. But that even if you do all of these things, it doesn't, of course, guarantee that you can know all the different risks. I'd say the big difference between external audit and internal audit is that internal audit, you actually have to show results. External audit, I joke. Don't take this seriously, but I joke that external auditors just need to show the work. Show up on Monday at 7 a.m. and finish at 11 p.m. But internal auditors actually have to show the work and actually have to show the results. Well, here is a case where it would be extremely embarrassing to not show the result, as in finding that significant risk, but technically it's not in breach of the code of ethics.